Hello and welcome to another episode of the Football History Boys podcast with me, Ben Jones, and as always, my good friend Gareth Thomas.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much, Gareth. Okay, so summer holidays have already started. How have you all started?
Oh, it's been good. It's hot though, isn't it? It is very hot.
It is a sweltering Cardiff at the moment, but I'm looking forward to the holidays. I'm looking forward to the show. I think we should crack on straight away today.
Absolutely. Okay, so this is our last show before the transfer window in Britain closes. So what we're going to say today is we're going to have a bit of a look at the history of transfers. We'll talk about transfers through time. Let's go right the way back then. FA's been formed. We're in the 1800s, mid-1800s to late 1800s. What was the situation? What did you do? If you wanted to move clubs as a player, or if a football team wanted to buy someone else, how would you do it?
Well, let's hop into our football TARDIS again, as we got out last week. So go right back then. So 1863, start of the FA, and for the first sort of 20 years, football was played without any real worries. There was a bit of a question of rules. But then in 1883 began this idea of professionalism came into the game, and this idea of money. And these working class teams were starting to play football, which was a threat to the upper class gentry of whom played the game before that.
Yeah, really interesting. Richard Holt, a sports historian, said that actually the FA, when they set up in 1863, never meant to be professional. The game was always intended to be this amateur game. You worked hard in the week, and then you played sport in your spare time. You never were a professional sportsman. And so this idea of professionalism was a really divisive idea at first, wasn't it?
Yeah, as historian J. Mangan brought about this idea of muscular Christianity, of how you became a better sportsman, but also a better Christian, a better person, and you did it through sport. So footballers in these working class teams in the northern factories were pretty good, and they started to enter the FA Cup, and they started to win the FA Cup. I think Blackburn Olympic were the first team to win.
Yeah, of course.
And Blackburn Rovers had won it, I think, got to the final the year before. So factory owners who ran these teams, they'd often get in the best players by offering them these broken time payments, or first of all offering them a job at their factory, so the player would move to go and join this new factory, which would help the factory team to win and do better, but also there would be a financial incentive involved as well.
It's really interesting. It's where it comes from. I guess like Sheffield Wednesdays, that their name comes from because their factory would be closed on a Wednesday for them to play football on a Wednesday.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So obviously there's United and Wednesday, and the owner would give them Wednesdays off to play football, and that's why they were Sheffield Wednesday, because they play on a Wednesday. So that's it. It would be you're good at football. Do you want to come work in my factory? And there's a way of getting around the rules, wasn't it? Yeah, loophole, I guess. And
it showed the power of the people in the end, didn't it, really? Because the working class people, as with more often playing football, they had more power behind them. Eventually, professionalism takes over. The Football League comes into effect, and the upper class teams like the Wanderers and Eton and things like this, they die out. They're not really seen much again in football history. So yeah, it's a major step, and it was one of our 50 most important moments in football history. Was the idea of professionalism, and other sports like rugby then would later have these debates, but it had a really major impact. But in terms of transfers, in 1889, in Sport and Life newspaper, they said about how transfers must be agreed upon by both clubs. That was all it was. It was just if a player wanted to go somewhere else, two clubs decided on it, agreed, fine, he can go. And then what I did was I looked a bit further on. So the Sheffield Independent in 1897. So sticking with a good Sheffield theme today, actually. I found an article around the transfer of a player, Peter Meehan, who played for Celtic. He went to Everton for £150 at the time, which would have been today's money is £18,900. So
that's a decent fee, isn't it?
Yeah, quite a substantial amount for the time. 2 years later, though, there was a big crisis to do with transfers and the transfers of players, because this whole idea of morality came out again. The Edinburgh Evening News had a big piece about the crisis that football was going under, about how this committee had been appointed by the FA with regards to transfer fees and the immoral and unsportsmanlikeness of selling a player. So it was all they were saying. It was the same as trafficking someone or
slavery,
or selling someone's flesh. Maybe a bit too far, but it says this happens with certain players. They get paid a lot of money gets spent on them, and they decided that no transfer should exceed £10. So 2 years before, someone had been sold for £150. So it's quite a big change to drop it all the way down to a tenner, which was only about just over £1,000 in today's money. So later on then, the Derbyshire Courier had all these responses to this idea of this committee, and people weren't very happy, these other clubs weren't happy, and they actually reached a crisis point where the Football League considered seceding from the FA because of transfers and because these too many rules are being imposed on these football clubs. And what the Derbyshire Courier did say was the clubs with the most money, or the long purses they call it, would be able to poach upon the best players, and the competition of football would be gone, leading to smaller gate receipts. So they're saying that clubs with the most money are going to benefit massively
and have all the best players.
And as we see today. So
very interesting. 100 years ago, 120 years ago, they were predicting then what we see today. And I guess that coincides then really with Billy Meredith. We talked about last week's one of Wales's greatest, 1907. He was standing for players' rights. So I guess you've got clubs arguing for the right to transfer players, along with Meredith then, who formed the PFA for the players' rights, the union of players, to actually push forward and say players deserve more money. But I think it's quite interesting because it shows that really, as much as people may not want to say it, football's always been about money. In a lot of circumstances, football's always touched upon this issue of money and how much should clubs spend, and money, does it influence the game in a negative way or anything? So there's always been this element of money.
Yes, it's nothing new. I mean, everyone seems to make out that football's all about money these days.
Against modern football.
But it's always been the same way. There's always caused conflict and debate, and there's always had newspaper articles worrying about the future of the game. Moving on then, right the way forward to 1961.
2 world wars in between, transfer fees steadily increase. Not a lot happens in terms of major moments, but we start to see the increase of money and so forth, isn't it?
But 1961, one of our most important moments in football history. If you want to check that out, you need to go to our website, which is
www.thefootballhistoryboys.com. Check that out. Have a little search. The 50 most important moments in football history. It was a series we did last year, wasn't it? And it was really popular. So then it went down really well with people talking about some of those key moments. What number moment was it for us, Ben?
It's number 21.
Number 21, 1961, scrapping of the maximum wage.
What do you know about it?
Okay, so we looked at that, didn't we, as one of those key moments. I've put in my notes, it was very important. I think that's a bit of an underestimation, really. It was incredibly important. Jimmy Hill, who you may remember, some of you, was chairman of the PFA at this point. So the Players Football Association, as we said, founded by Meredith in 1907. Now we're in 1961. Jimmy Hill's the chairman, and historian Matthew Taylor, a sports historian, writes that there was real fear of a strike in football. The wages weren't increasing in line with what we see outside. We've talked about it on the last pod. 1950s were massive for football. Spectatorships increased massively. Obviously, footballers retire early and still did then, as they do today. But their pay didn't reflect that.
No, they were paid only £8 a week in 1946, and by 1961, the maximum was £20 a week for a player to earn, which
really wasn't a lot at all,
even in today's money.
And so, understandably, footballers want to be paid more. Now the gates are huge, as we said. Lots of clubs set their maximum attendance, their highest ever attendances in this period, still standing today. Lots of them. Thousands of fans are coming. The football clubs are making lots of money, but the players aren't being paid fairly for fair work.
And with the early retirement age of about 35, probably on average, they're out of work for the rest of their lives, maybe. So they need a higher wage.
Yeah, and this is where you get stories of ex-footballers becoming carpenters or solderers or whatever else.
John Charles, as we discussed 2 weeks ago, moving away to Italy to earn more money.
Yeah, so there's this real fear that football was going to split, again, like we talked about sort of 50, 60 years earlier. There was this fear that football was going to split. And so the Football League said, OK, we're going to concede. They concede to the PFA. To public opinion, as we said, public opinion backed the fact that there should be the taking away of the maximum wage, and the maximum wage goes. Now, this will slowly see and lead to what we see today of staggeringly high wages that footballers are earned. It didn't happen straight away. But obviously, as we talk about, was it De Gea I was reading today, something like 375,000 they want to offer him a week for his new contract.
Insane.
Of course, Bale with China lurking for him with maybe £1 million a week that you can't even begin to comprehend as finance figures. Actually, this moment is really, really fundamental.
Yeah, so we did mention on the original piece We said, why was that moment so important? We said it was easy. Just look at the modern game. In the 1960s, the PFA's arguments, they had credit and they had class. And it was a movement which was backed by the public, and it campaigned for the principles and fair play. Whereas today, like you say, we've seen these other articles about £300,000 a week. The public do not back the footballers in any way, probably rightly so, because of what they earn. So it just shows a big clash between the players of yesteryear and the players of today.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, fast forward another sort of 17, 18 years. 1979 now is an interesting one because we've got a little bit of an aside to it. So we're talking about Trevor Francis, the first £1 million player, as he's widely considered, but actually he's the first British £1 million player, isn't he?
I didn't realise this.
No, I didn't.
I thought I'd look it up because I wasn't too sure. I thought I'll type it into Google.
Make sure.
And we did find there was actually someone who was worth £1 million more or before him.
Absolutely, yeah. So These Football Times, another brilliant website. Check them out if you haven't before. They are they write about football history as well, and they told us or informed us about this guy Giuseppe Salvodi, an Italian man who actually was sold for the equivalent of he was the first. He wasn't just the first £1 million player. He was the first £2 billion
lira.
Sorry, first 2 billion lira player. He was known as Mr. 2 billion. What a great nickname, Mr.
That's amazing.
Mr. 2 billion. And he moved an equivalent at the time in 1975. He moved from Bologna to Napoli for 2 billion lira, as we said, which was worth £1.2 million. So there we go. He was the first £1 million player. It surpassed Johan Cruyff's transfer from Barcelona to Ajax, which was just over 900,000 in British money. He becomes the first £1 million player. But we'll talk about Trevor Francis because he's the one people know. We're talking about the British game and how fees have increased. So go on, Trevor Francis.
Well, I was just going to further what you said. I was surprised about it because we've grown up thinking he was the first £1 million player. And I went on some websites yesterday and I found out like Maradona was sold around the same time for even more, for like 1.7 million.
Yeah.
So it's only something very big in the British game. It doesn't hold much resonance in wider football.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. Clough didn't want to make him the first £1 million player. I was reading. He publicly it was announced as a £999,999. £1 short of $1 million to not put the pressure on him. However, when the fees have come through, he's moving from Trevor Francis, moving from Birmingham to Nottingham Forest under Clough. It actually worked out as about 1.2 million. So he is the first British, but as we said, actually, interestingly, not the first world £1 million player.
But a good signing nonetheless. Won the European Cup, didn't he?
Yeah. Brilliant signing. Yeah, brilliant signing. Okay, another big moment then. Again, his fees are still increasing as we go through these decades. Perhaps one of the most biggest, and we've asked for some of your opinions on Twitter and Facebook this week. We've had 3 opinions saying this moment. 94th Minute on Twitter, Nathan on Twitter, and Lewis Sticks on Facebook as well, saying this moment in 1995 was one of the biggest, massive impact on football in Europe, gave the power to the players and the agents that we see today.
Yeah.
It is the moment, and we've got it as one of our top moments, we said, in the 50 most important. Mm-hmm. It is Jean-Marc Bosman and his Bosman ruling in 1995. What happened, Ben?
So I find this quite difficult to comprehend. It's a lot of financial mumbo jumbo, and it seems to go over my head quite a bit. So Gareth, can you enlighten me as to what happened?
Yeah, I'm really interested in this, Bosman. I wrote this bit for the article, and I think I've written about it in the past as well. I think it's a major moment in football that gives us the game that we see today. And it's weird to think it only happened in 1995, realistically not that long ago.
No.
But effectively, the situation is you're contracted to a club, you're unhappy at that club, but you cannot move on at the end of your contract. You are owned by that club. And therefore, if your contract expires, a club still has to pay a transfer fee. You can't move on a free transfer.
No.
What Bosman says is this is wrong. I'm effectively a slave, and it's what we talked about again, the slavery of players. I should be able to move. My contract's expired. And because he refuses to sign a new contract, his time with Liège in Belgium was coming to a close. And what they did instead, they cut his wages by 75% and said, you're going to sit here until a club pays for you. Dunkirk offers him a deal. I think they're only in the French Ligue 2, second league in French, in France.
Good French.
They refuse it, absolutely refuse it, not interested. But there's just this legal battle that happens. So he takes to the European Court. And actually, it really ruins his career. Quite sadly, it ruins his career. No one wants to touch him during this time.
I think he's a troublemaker, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think he's a troublemaker. It's going to obviously cause damage for a lot of clubs, so they want to take a chance on him. He goes to San Quentin and Saint Denis for a short period of time, but really it finishes his career. He doesn't do anything significant afterwards. But what the European Court decide is, yes, if your time comes to an end with a club, you are able to move on a free transfer at the age of 24. After 24, you can move for a free. Before the age of 24, there's compensation that's paid to the club.
Is that still in place now?
Yeah, still in place now. I'm going to play a little bit of Ian Holloway at this moment just to tell you what Ian Holloway thinks. It's quite a famous rant, isn't it, of him at a press conference. This comes from during a time where Wayne Rooney was talking about leaving on a free. There was rumours he was leaving on a free. And Holloway's really not happy because he's saying Man United have invested so much into Rooney. How on earth is he allowed to leave on a free just because he's over the age of 24? Let me just play that little clip for us.
The game is wrong. The people in charge of the game are wrong. And I'm not calling them names. I'm just telling them they're wrong. They are so wrong, this is frightening. If Alex Ferguson is being bullied by a player and his agent or whatever how you want to call it, how wrong is the game? Yeah, and when are you going to listen to the people who are involved in the game? And football should look at itself. It's wrong. FIFA, UEFA, whoever you are, you're wrong.
As you can hear there, Holloway pretty angry
Pretty cross.
Yeah, pretty angry about the Bosman ruling, and it's understandable. Obviously, for clubs, it's not the best situation, is it? Their player can leave on a free, but ultimately, I think it is a good thing. We see a lot of free transfers. We'll talk about some of the best free transfers of all time later in the show.
Yeah, what it has done, as you said in your article, it has seen the rise of the football agent since, because obviously no fees, so the players could demand big signing on fees, and the agent as well would demand quite a big fee as well. So.
Yeah, of course. Obviously, people like Ramsey and Rabiot moving to Juventus this summer for big fees in terms of their agent fee and the signing on fee, but they don't have to pay anything to Arsenal and PSG. So yeah, I mean, it's had swings and roundabouts in that way in terms of how good it is.
Yeah, there we are. So as we can see now, that football has just exploded, and transfer fees have gone a bit out the window. They've been obviously the biggest one at the moment is Neymar for €222 million, £198 million. It's amount you can't even begin to comprehend.
It's staggering because literally just a few years ago, you never would have been able to comprehend that.
No. I mean, I remember Zidane breaking the record in about 2001 for about 46 million to Real Madrid, and that was the record for quite a while. Because at the time, it was so much bigger than anything else that had come before it, until Kaká and then Ronaldo a few months later broke it, didn't they, for I think about 56 and then 80 million. Obviously then Bale steps up and he breaks it. But what I found most interesting, we got a list here of the 50 highest fees of all time, was that I remember when Torres signed for Chelsea from Liverpool for 50 million, and at the time it was one of the top, must have been the top 5-6 signings ever.
Mind-blowing, yeah.
And just when was that, 2011, so only 8 years later, and now he's only the 43rd highest of all time. So the fees have completely just blown up,
isn't it?
The fact you see Kyle Walker in the top 50 signings of all time for amounts is quite disturbing almost. He's not good enough to be in the top 50.
Harry Maguire, by the time we release this, could be an £80 million player.
I mean,
it is just staggering numbers, and it's only going to keep going that one way, isn't it? People say football's broken, whether or not it's broken, but the money that is involved in the game nowadays, you can't see that. There's never going to be a point where it comes down, is there? Because suddenly Lewis Dunk is being talked about as a £45 million player because Harry Maguire's gone for 80 million, and it's just staggering numbers.
João Felix gone to Atletico Madrid this summer for 114 million, and I hadn't even heard of him until the very end of last season.
He's had one good season. Yeah, it's staggering. And of course, if the gamble pays off for a football club, then brilliant.
But the thing is, people are now saying, Harry Maguire, he's worth 80 million. It doesn't really matter anymore, because the fees don't really mean anything anymore. It's just meaningless numbers.
Of course.
If he's going for that much money, it is meaningless. And I think So some signings before that set the precedent. Lukaku, 75
I think
million.
I think the problem is what it causes is lower down the pyramids. I think Cardiff City has said in the past, I'm a Cardiff fan. I think the fees that are being talked about for Championship players now, even Kenneth Sahor, who's just moved from Cardiff for £8 million to West Brom, £8 million back in the day in the Championship, sort of even just 10 years ago, would have bought you a ridiculously good player. Kenneth Sahor, I don't think he's worth £8 million. And I think the fees, it's going to start to trickle down the game, isn't it? And there's a fear for smaller clubs like Bolton and Bury, who are in trouble financially, over a couple of £1 million, where players in the top echelons are being sold for far, far more. So there is a trickle-down effect in that way, isn't there?
That's why you've got to credit people like Jurgen Klopp for signing Andy Robertson 2 years ago for £8 million. Because how much is he worth now?
Yes. Yeah, and there's still those bargains to be had. And again, we'll talk about them later in the show.
So there you go. You see the whole history there of the transfers there. You've got the original idea of the FA and the Football League almost splitting over the idea of fees, moving up to the maximum wage.
God, can you just imagine what those guys in 1863 would say about players moving for £200 million?
I don't know if...
I don't think they could comprehend it.
£200 million back then, I probably could have bought you the country.
But what about the women's game? Because we haven't touched upon that, and absolutely you've done some research and you've asked some of our friends on Twitter to give you a bit of a hand with that. Obviously, the women's game is growing. That's a fantastic thing. The Women's Premier League and all the different things that are happening with that. The fees, how do they compare to sort of the men's game?
Well, I was quite frustrated yesterday on Facebook, it's not on Facebook, on Google. I was looking at women's record transfer fees, and I just couldn't find anything. It was really difficult to find anything. So I put something out on Twitter, and I said, I think Without Football Life is Boring is a really good Twitter account. Mm-hmm. And I asked them, what's the record fee? And they weren't even too sure because of all this, because women's football is actually more like the men's game in the Victorian times. It's,
financially.
But the way the contracts work.
Yes, okay. Yes.
Players will sign for a club and they'll basically run out their contract, and at the end of it, they're just free to join a new club. And then the new club will say, come and join us. Like Nikita Paris this summer has left Man City, so she's just left, and then she's gone and signed for Lyon. So no fees involved, just you run out of contract, then you sign. So it's a bit like how the men's game used to be. Financially, it is similar as well. Obviously, a bit higher fees than it was back then.
Yeah.
I did find Frank Kirby moved from Reading to Chelsea in 2015 for a reported £50,000. So it does happen sometimes that women's footballers move during their contract. But what I then looked at was a bit further, and it said that in 2018, women's football clubs around the world spent a total of £375,000 on international transfers. If you want to get some contrast, the men's game, they totaled at £5.4 billion. So, I mean, we're talking complete yin and yang, just two complete different games. And FIFA said the report helped to reflect the reality of women's football finances. So, there you go. Women's football is not about the money at all, is it really? It's just about getting the best players and just doing the best.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought it was really interesting. John Carrier replied to us on Twitter as well, telling us about an incident in 1972. So Alan Ball transferred from Everton to Arsenal in the men's game for $300,000. And then outside left, Laura Sullivan transferred from Watford Ladies for 50p. For 50p.
Wow.
Laura was 18 at the time. She said in a newspaper afterwards, I'm just as good at value as Alan is to Arsenal. So she's saying I'm worth the same. You know, Arsenal got a good deal with Alan Ball. I'm worth that as well. But it's staggering, isn't it? Even back then, 50p. Crazy. Anyway, I've enjoyed that chat. That's been really useful. What we're going to do, have a little break, and then we'll talk about our top 3 transfers of all time and our worst 3 transfers.
And then we'll do a quiz
of all time. And then we'll have a little quiz.
Lovely.
Let's have a quiz. Okay, we've had a nice cold drink because it's such a warm day. But what we thought would be quite interesting to do, as we said, it's our last show before the window closes. Let's talk about our top 3 transfers ever, and then we'll do our worst 3. But we'll start with our top 3. And what we said, because we'll try and narrow it down, as there's been so many transfers through time, we'll have one historical, one free, and one who's lived up to a big transfer fee, okay? You kick off. Let's start with our free transfers. Who is your free transfer?
Okay, my free transfer comes from 2002, and it is from PSG to Bolton, and it was hhtkhy.
Oh, what a transfer.
Because Bolton at the time just came up to Premier League, and they were a bit, it was a bit. I remember when they came up, I remember as a kid thinking, who are these? I remember Sam Allardyce signing hhtkhy, then later on going to sign Mario Jardel and Fernando Hierro and all these sort of great players from the earlier 90s. But I thought Okocha, he went there, made a massive impact, and is still a Premier League legend.
He was superb. He was so likeable, wasn't he, JJ Okocha?
Yeah, just for the way he played.
Yeah.
And the smile on his face, reminiscent to Ronaldinho later down the line.
Absolutely, I was going to say that. Yeah.
And he was in that amazing Nigerian team, which did so well at the 98
I think I always used to try and sign him on the old Football Managers, the old FIFA, because he was just so likeable. I wanted him in my team.
Yeah, so skillful.
Yeah.
Right. Well, who was your best free transfer then?
Top three is potentially a controversial one for some listeners, but for me, it was Sol Campbell. From Spurs to Arsenal. It caused a massive upset, and I think I like it just because it's from a rival to a rival, a direct rival transfer, obviously. Free transfer, using that Bosman ruling that we talked about just 6 years after the Bosman ruling came into effect. Not only did it cause massive upset, but actually Sol Campbell went on to be an Arsenal great, didn't he? Of course.
Oh,
he
absolutely,
won
yeah.
2 Premier Leagues, part of the Invincibles, won 2 FA Cups, and also was a Champions League runner-up as well. But he was superb at Arsenal. I mean, I really remember in 2001, so I really remember it at Arsenal. But it causes huge divide still. People are split on Sol Campbell. You talk to a Spurs fan about him, they're not happy. But I think Sol Campbell, what a free transfer that was.
I actually put a tweet out earlier asking for our listeners' best free transfers.
Okay.
And More Than a Game 66, who I mentioned on last week's podcast, he's replied today saying his best free transfer's got to be Super Sol from Spurs. So
there you go,
what you said.
Agree.
He still has as many titles as they've won in their lifetime, and they signed him twice on a free. They did, didn't they? They signed him back
yes, of
when
course,
he was a bit older. And talking of hhtkhy, actually, there was Follow the Trawler on, which is also another podcast. So they replied to us on Twitter. They did a few came straight to their mind. Pirlo going from AC Milan to Juventus. Steve McManaman going from Liverpool to Real Madrid, and that was one of the first major Bosmans I remember at the time.
Yeah.
And Sol Campbell's right up there. But for him, purely for the joy he brought to those who loved watching him play, it was Bolton getting hhtkhy.
Good.
So there we go.
There we go.
We're both right.
Okay, let's do then your player that's lived up to the big fee. Okay, so there's been a lot of big fees, and we've talked about that earlier in the show. Who is your player that lived up to his big fee?
Okay, my big player lived up to the fee was Alan Shearer, when he went from Blackburn to Newcastle for £15 million back in 1996. Because he won the league in 1995 for Blackburn. He was one of the best strikers in the world. He moved for a world record fee of £50 million at the time. Newcastle beating Manchester United to his signing, and I imagine a few eyebrows would have been raised with him being the most expensive player ever. But yeah, you can't really deny it. He got over 200 goals for Newcastle, broke their goal scoring record. He's an absolute legend, isn't he, amongst Newcastle fans? And I think
absolutely
his Premier League goal record, it'd be very surprising to see it ever beaten.
Well, I tell you, it was beaten on my Football Manager in the year 2036. That's how long it takes. So maybe it'll be that long before you see it broken. By a Russian called Valery Smirnov.
Smirnov Ice.
He beat he beat the record, but it took him a long time. It took like 10 seasons to do it, and absolutely, I think it's going to be a long time for the Putin. Yeah, good answer. Mine, I was torn. I was torn between two here. One very recent, and one a few years back, and I'm going to cheat and have both. So, firstly, Van Dijk, Southampton to Liverpool, £75 million. Obviously, you're a Liverpool fan. I'm sure you're a big fan of Virgil van Dijk.
Yeah.
I think just because in January 2018 when it happened, and people mocked the £75 million fee. How on earth can you pay that much?
I remember
for a player?
Seeing on Twitter Man United fans saying you've been mugged off for a poor man's Chris Smalling. And yeah, there you go.
But what he's done is sort out a problem area, isn't it? Liverpool's problem area was defence. They were shocking. They made so many errors, and I'm sure I don't want to make you reminisce on that.
He's favourite for the Ballon d'Or now.
Yeah, superb. He's been superb, and obviously this last season, sadly didn't win the league for Liverpool fans, but the 4th highest ever Premier League points total, and also won the Champions League. So I think he's paid off a chunk of his big fee. My other one was going to be Wayne Rooney. I was torn between the two. Rooney, obviously, he moved for about 26 million back in 2004. Was it? Was it 4?
He would be a teenager.
Yeah, he's teenager, about 18. Moved to Man United, and I mean, who can deny him? He's Man United's top ever goal scorer. He's England's top goal scorer. It's a gamble paying 26 million 18-year-old, and actually he turned out to be a phenomenal signing.
Did incredible. I mean, even as a Liverpool fan, I got to say, what a player he was for United.
His goals, again, is going to struggle for people actually to get anywhere near him for Man United, really. I think they take someone like Wayne Rooney back for this next season, wouldn't they?
There we are.
Absolutely. Okay, go on then. Your historical transfer.
Right, I've just looked down at your lap where your sheet is with all your research, and I've noticed that we have the same one.
That's fine. Don't mind that.
Alfredo Di Stefano from Millonarios to Real Madrid back in the 1950s.
I looked up the fee for this. I translated using the Bank of England inflation calculator.
Well done.
So it was estimated to be around about £195,000, 4 million pesos, I think it was, but £195,000. Today that would be worth about £5.3 million. So not very much, Di Stefano.
In today's money.
But I wouldn't say relative and loan. He was doing very well in Argentina and Colombia, but it was a gamble nonetheless for Real Madrid to take him on. But at the time, it was controversial, wasn't it? Because he was either going to go to Barcelona or Real Madrid.
Well, there was a big transfer saga over it, and they actually ended up deciding that he'd play, was it 2 seasons for Real Madrid and then 2 seasons for Barcelona?
Yeah, that was the La Liga, or the federation's decision at the time, wasn't it? Which seems a bit of a crazy decision. Okay, you can both have him share him 2 seasons.
Share the play, but then I think Barcelona thought, you know what, this is more hassle than it's worth.
Yeah.
We're pulling out of the deal.
Yeah,
and then there you go. Di Stefano became probably one of Real Madrid's greatest ever players.
Yeah, and there's a lot of talk actually that the government got involved, wasn't there? And Franco, and people saying actually there was pressure saying Barcelona need to pull out of it, and whatever they did. But yeah, 396 times he played for them in all competitions for Real Madrid, 308 goals, staggering. He won 8 league titles, a Copa del Rey, an Intercontinental Cup, and of course, most importantly, 5 European Cups.
Just the 5.
Just the 5. And there's that famous picture, isn't he, where he's sitting there with all 5 in front of him.
Oh, yeah.
Staggering. What a signing. There we go. We matched on that. I
quite like that.
Yeah, I agree. Let's hear some of your views. Then we ask for some of your best before we move on to worst. Chris Malone on Twitter says Ozzy Ardiles and Ricky Villa signing for Tottenham for Spurs in 1978 changed English transfer market forever. We had Alan Shearer. Paul Warnock said Alan Shearer. He agrees with you on that way.
Yeah.
Outside Right again, big fans of ours, and we're big fans of them, on Twitter said Cantona to Man United. Very fair, perhaps. Vieira, nice one here from Nathan. Vieira, £3 million, and yet he dominated football for Arsenal for 15 years. Absolutely great shout. Lewis Williams said Robinho to Manchester City, because that was sort of that trigger for him of Man City starting to get the big players. It was. Yeah. It was that I remember it was a huge sign. It was when
he didn't do great, did he? He did okay.
Yeah, but at the time when he signed, it was like, oh my word, they've signed Robinho.
Was it the same day as Berbatov, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was deadline day. What a deadline day that was. That was when deadline days were amazing.
That's when they were good, yeah.
Yeah, and also Lewis says as well, he's a Cardiff fan, said Bellamy on loan to Cardiff, which is a good point. Was that Bellamy was a Premier League footballer, fell out with the management at Man City, and ended up signing for Cardiff on a loan transfer. He was superb for us. He was so good that season.
There'll be a little discussion in me about when Cardiff City decided to do a bit of a Bolton and sign all these players who were great a few years before. So
yeah,
Fowler,
in the same season.
Hasselbank, Sinclair, all joined in around the same time.
Yeah, brilliant. Hasselbank was superb. Fowler injured a little bit, but it was great having him. And yeah, again, Trevor Sinclair, he was superb for us. Still a big Cardiff fan as well. He always tweets about
best bicycle kick ever as well.
Yeah, superb. Okay. Let's talk about your worst transfers of all time then. We may match on some of these. I suspect we may well do. So we haven't set parameters for this. Just what's your top 3 worst?
Okay, my worst, one of my top 3 worst is Alex Teixeira from Shakhtar Donetsk to Zhuangzhou for around £40 million a few years ago. That's one of my worst. Purely because Teixeira, at the time, was at the peak of his powers. He was a really good player. He'd been dominant in the Champions League. He was linked with all these big clubs all around Europe. And then he decided, you know what? I don't want to go there. I'm going to China instead. When it just showed the money in football is having a major impact. And then obviously China trying to improve their league, but these players at the peak of their powers moving over there, pretty much ending.
It scares you a little bit about Bale, doesn't it? Gareth Bale obviously linked very, very heavily with China, and perhaps again by the time we release this, he may well have made that move.
I could have gone for Oscar as well.
Yeah, there's been a few stinkers.
I mean, it's not as bad if you're someone like I think when Ramirez went, or Tevez, sort of towards the end of their careers. But when you're 27 and you're going over there, you're there. Right, that was one of my worst. What was your first worst one?
Interesting. Well, I've gone for Andy Carroll. I think it's lambasted, and it's always going to be. Deadline day 2011 is to replace Torres for 50 million. I've not included that Torres one, and we'll chat about that in a second. Why? But Andy Carroll, £35 million. Again, I put in the inflation calculator about 42 million
worth
today.
Every penny.
Terrible. So his Newcastle record, Premier League record, 30 goals in 80 games. Not bad. His Liverpool record, 6 goals in 44 games.
Is that the league?
League record, yeah, Premier League record.
He scored a couple of big goals. He scored the FA Cup final, didn't he?
But not worth 35 million. Not a good transfer.
No, that was a panic buy.
Yeah.
We got Suarez on the same day though. So,
yeah. Swings around like.
He was just injured all the time. That's the problem. If he wasn't injured all the time, he got such great potential, Andy Carroll. But terrible signing.
Free agent now as well. A good free agent for perhaps Cardiff City. We're linking
all back to Cardiff City.
We are linked with him. Anyway, my second then, I'm going to go again, link with Liverpool. Philippe Coutinho. Controversial again, perhaps. But I really think he's just £142 million.
Scored in the Copa del Rey final.
I know he did, but £142 million, January 2018.
I don't think he's done that bad. I think it's more because of the fee. He's not worth
exactly, and that's why I'm saying he's not lived up to the fee. I guess contrasting to players who have lived up, I think he really hasn't. Stunning record, Liverpool. Obviously, the main man that cut inside and curl it into the top corner. Stunning. We loved him in the Premier League. Everyone, even other clubs, loved Coutinho. But he's been booed, isn't he? I know Spanish fans do that, but he's been booed. The fans want him out. He scored 13 goals in 51, which is not horrendous. But I just think for the hype and the money and the fact that he was linked for so long, he's looked so unhappy. At times when I've seen him, he just doesn't want to be there.
Like a fish out of water.
Yeah. So I think for 142 million, Barca would, if they could go back in time, they would never go with that. That's what I think.
And Coleman had a dream on Twitter. They said that one of their worst transfers ever is Coutinho. They thought he's a great player, but they remember thinking there's just no value in football anymore.
Yeah.
If he's going for that much money, then yeah. And his record probably proves that he's not worth it.
Fair play. Okay, your second.
Adrian Mutu from Parma to Chelsea. Now Chelsea made a lot of signings around this time, around 2003-04. I remember them getting Drogba on the same time, maybe the season after, Kesman as well. And Mutu, who was one of Europe's best strikers, he'd been amazing in Serie A for Parma. And he went for 15.8 million to Chelsea, and he didn't do very well at all. He didn't score many goals. I think he got 6 goals, and then he got banned for taking cocaine. So,
he owed them, didn't he? Yeah, it's based on like £7 million compensation to Chelsea. I think it was decided by a court.
Yeah, it was just a complete mess.
A catastrophe.
But it just showed how these great players, if they get too much too soon, it just ruins their careers. So I think Mutu, what promise he had and how little he delivered. And I think he's been forgotten a bit. So I thought I'll mention it on the podcast to get him in there.
Right, I've got another Chelsea one. My final one, it's another Chelsea one. Sorry, Chelsea.
Yeah.
Andrei Shevchenko. Milan to Chelsea, £30 million. Again, I put it into the inflation calculator, 42.6 million today, in the summer of 2006. Just because the fee was big back then, 30 million was a big fee. But he was massive, wasn't he? He had scored 173 goals for AC Milan. He had surpassed 25 goals in 6 of 8 seasons at the San Siro. He'd won the Ballon d'Or in 2004. He was tipped as this superb, well, everyone could see he was a phenomenal footballer. He moves to Chelsea, big signing, and his record for Chelsea in the Premier League, 9 goals in 48 games. He's there for 2.5 years. He goes back out on loan, and then he moves to Dynamo Kiev. He goes back to on loan to Milan, and then moves on permanently. But what
just
a terrible...
a mess. I mean, I remember him scoring on his debut against Liverpool in the Community Shield final, and I thought, oh, here we go. He's going to be amazing. But that's often forgotten as well. I think it's been taken over the Torres to Chelsea and the Andy Carroll's Liverpool, and transfers afterwards.
Oh, he was terrible.
But Shevchenko was horrendous.
That's not Chelsea's fault. They were signing a good player, but he just didn't deliver for them. What's your final one?
My final one is Paul Konchesky from Fulham to Liverpool in 2010. Purely because we just had Benitez at Liverpool, and he'd made a couple of duff signings, but he made, he signed Garcia, Alonso, Mascherano, great buys. And then Roy Hodgson comes in and he signs Christian Poulsen, was one of the signings, and then Paul Konchesky, and it just set the tone for the next few years at Liverpool. If we're signing Paul Konchesky to be starting in our team, we're not setting our standards very high. And then, as you see, a couple of years, then you got Andy Carroll coming in, Stuart Downing, all these players, and they're just not very good. Yeah. But Konchesky was absolutely dreadful.
Yeah,
but he just wasn't a Liverpool player. Just terrible.
A couple of other notable mentions. Remember Jonathan Woodgate signing for Real Madrid? Own goal and a red card on his debut, and then injury plague. Sadly, his body gave up on him. But
the worst debut of all time.
Oh, horrendous. I didn't include Torres because I think actually I know it was a big fear that famous miss against Man United. But he scored a Champions League, a couple of important goals.
Barcelona, yeah.
Yeah, 40-odd goals in the Premier League. So I think he didn't do as bad as some people think. But
he didn't do great.
Morata's another terrible Chelsea signing. I thought it was a good signing at the time. I tipped it as a really good signing.
Got a feeling up Fred to Man United this season. That's pretty poor.
Obviously Pogba, we don't know where that will happen. Maybe he'll have a phenomenal season turn around, but as it stands, it looks a bit of a waste of money. A couple of other positive ones. I forgot to mention Ronaldo. Fair play to Man United with Ronaldo. Signed him from Sporting, sold him for a huge amount. Obviously did very well at Man United and sold him for a huge amount of money as well.
Likewise, I'd say for Real Madrid, 80 million is probably cheap in the end because of how well he did there. He got more goals in games.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he was worth...
And I know we bashed Chelsea, but Drogba, 24 million, I mean, what a player he was as well. Actually, he was someone who lived up to his feet.
Started off a bit iffy, didn't he, I remember?
Yeah.
And I think his second season, he was fantastic. There we go.
Lovely. Good chat, that. Is it time for a quiz?
It is time for a quiz. Right, last week we started a new quiz. Did one the first week, but realised it was from 9 years ago, so some of the questions were dated. So this is from the 40 awesome football quiz questions.
I think I did quite well last week. Didn't do too bad.
You did okay.
Yeah.
You said Avram Grant over 70, and he was actually 53 at the time.
But I did get the M23 derby.
You did. That's quite impressive, actually. Right, so first of all, last week we set a question for the listeners, which was Billy Wright, the first footballer in the world to earn 100 international caps, spent his whole career at which football club? And we did have an answer on our Twitter. I'll just find it now. It was from Ring Cafe, is their name on Twitter, S. Villarino, and they correctly told us the answer was Wolverhampton Wanderers.
Well done to them.
So there you go. Well done. Thank you very much. So, here's your question today.
Here we go.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. 3 teams have sat at the top of the Premier League only to be relegated in the same season. Can you name them?
That is superb.
I'm not going to give you a timer. We're going to talk through it.
Okay. So at some point they've been top of the Premier League and then ended up being relegated.
In the same season.
And we're not talking about alphabetical.
No.
Okay.
Just in the same season. This is an incredible question. Who would have thought this? Wow. I like this.
Okay. Let's go with Blackpool.
Okay.
Because I think they may have started quite strongly initially and then...
They did start strongly, yeah.
Then suddenly, as I think they were relegated on the last day, weren't they? So I really don't know for this, but I'll go Blackpool. I'm going to go with... Who else started the season strongly? I mean, Cardiff did. We beat Manchester City our first time up.
I think you would know if Cardiff were top, though, wouldn't you?
No, I don't think we ever were top. So I'll go with Blackpool, and then I'm going to go with Sunderland as a guess, and then I'm going to go with a final guess of maybe one of Newcastle United's relegation seasons, Newcastle.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. Right, so all incorrect. Okay, we got Charlton 98-99, Bolton 2011-12, and Hull City 2016-17.
Well, there you go.
All the top of the league.
Maybe some of our
at
listeners
one
would have got
stage. Okay, dokie do. Right, the next question. 4 Manchester United players have won European Footballer of the Year award. Can you name them?
George Best.
Okay. Oh, I'll set a timer actually. There you go. Set.
Okay, I'm going to go with George Best and go with Wayne Rooney.
Okay.
And go with Cristiano Ronaldo.
Okay.
And Eric Cantona.
Ooh, did it in the time there. Right, so the answers... Okay, Cristiano Ronaldo, correct, 2008. George Best, you said him yet?
Yeah.
Correct, 1968. Bobby Charlton, 1966. And Dennis Law, 1964. Man United, very good in the 60s. Okie doke, right, next one. What was introduced for the first time by trainer David Coleman in the 1920s at Pittodrie Stadium, Aberdeen? Time starts now.
Good question. 1920s.
Was introduced for the first time.
Could it be warm-ups? Could be warm-ups, as they start to think about how can we get our players ready. Where's my timer? I'll go with that. Warm-ups.
So warm-ups for players. Okay, the answer is dugouts.
Oh.
The first stadium to have dugouts, and also in 1978, Pittodrie became the second all-seated stadium in Great Britain.
Brilliant.
Second, not really worth that fact. Okay, next one we have, right, here we go. You'll get this one, maybe. Ryan Giggs is the Wales football manager, if you didn't know. But in which sport was his father, Danny Wilson, a Welsh international? Okay, time is going.
I just thought hockey, but was it rugby? It may well have been rugby. I tell you what, I'm going to go with, just because we're Welsh.
Okay.
I'm torn between hockey and rugby. I'm going to go with rugby.
It is rugby. Can you tell me which code of rugby it is?
Rugby league.
It is rugby league.
Yeah.
Well done. Good.
Yeah.
Got that one right. Okie doke. Right. England first entered the Football World Cup in 1950. How many tournaments have they failed to qualify for since? How many World Cup tournaments that is?
Okay. I don't think it's that many. I think they've been to the majority. I think at maximum it's going to be 3. Okay. I'm going to go with, but I believe in you a bit more, England. As much as I don't want to, I'm going to say 2. I think they've not been to 2.
Okay, do you know the years?
I think one of the ones potentially they did not make was in the 70s.
Okay.
Were they at 70? Did they? I feel like because if they won it in 66, no, they would have been there.
They were at 70.
Yeah, I go 78.
Okay.
And the Euros they failed to qualify in the 2000s, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Let's go 78 and 78 and 58.
Okay. 3. So they haven't qualified for 3. 74, West Germany.
Oh, they were
78, Argentina. And 94, USA. So there you go. 3 tournaments they haven't qualified for.
That's why a lot of
Surprised?
people probably in the UK don't like 94, wasn't it? Because we talked about that on Twitter the other day, 94, and a lot of people were very negative about it.
Ireland qualified, didn't they? But
yeah.
No one else, no British teams qualified. Right, okay, question for the listeners then. Let's go for this one here. I like this question, because I know the answer already. What's different about the recently launched limited edition Sabutio table set featuring Arsenal and Chelsea teams? So, read it again. What's different about the recently launched limited edition Sabutio table football set featuring Arsenal and Chelsea teams? Any ideas?
Yeah, I think so, but
Okay.
I'll leave it open.
Tell me off air.
I will.
Okay, if you have the answer to the question, you can tweet it to us at TFHBS.
And also, you can get in touch on Facebook. Look us up, the Football History Boys. Give us a like, give us a mention, and also give us an email too. Our email address is
thefootballhistoryboys@hotmail.com, or as you said last week, give us a text if you know us personally.
Yes.
There we are. Brilliant. Okay, so we're going to move on then.
Okay, let's have another break, and then we'll come back with our final topic for the day. We've asked you this week to ask us some questions. What are our thoughts on different things? Get to know us a bit better. We've had some good questions. The first one from Stephen Brandt, who's very good to us. He's given us lots of likes and retweets in the past.
Yeah.
He asks us, what is the best league match? Interesting, he just specifies league. Best league match that you've ever seen?
Okay, I imagine that is football league match. I've chosen first. I was torn because obviously being a Liverpool fan, first matches that came to my head were Liverpool matches because they're the ones I've invested most time in. But I've gone for something different. And I've gone for Real Madrid 3, Barcelona 4 in 2014 at the Bernabeu. It was an incredible match. I remember watching it at my friend's house at university. Messi hat-trick, 2 penalties for Barcelona, a red card for guess who?
Ramos.
Yeah, Sergio Ramos red card. It's been end to end, unbelievable drama, feisty, but just really high quality match. And 4-3, it was just, I remember just being on the edge of my seat the whole game, and just showed Messi being the man yet again. So that was my one. I also had personal choice. Manchester United 1, Liverpool 4 at Old Trafford.
I remember that.
2009.
Dosena.
Yeah, as that exactly. I remember Liverpool were about 7 points off in the title race, and they went to Old Trafford needing to win, and everyone thought it would be really close. And they went behind quite early on to Ronaldo penalty, and then all of a sudden just came back. Torres just destroying Vidic, and Vidic can never play well against Liverpool again. I think 3 red cards since showed that. But yeah, 4-1. Ultimately, Man United won the league, but it was a great game. And Dosena lobbing Van der Sar in the last kick of the game.
And Gerrard kissed the camera, didn't you? Remember that famous celebration?
Yeah, he did. He did it a few times afterwards as well. Yeah. So that was that one.
Okay, mine.
What was your game?
I've split it into 2. I've been a bit greedy again. I've gone for best game I've seen in the stadium, best game I've seen on TV. Best game I've seen in the stadium, you called it earlier. Cardiff City 3, Manchester City 2. It was our first home game in the Premier League, my first experience of the Premier League as a Cardiff fan in August 2013. Man City were the defending champions. Obviously, vast amounts of money spent. Expectations were high and low for Cardiff. And we beat them. Fraser Campbell scored twice. Aaron Gunnarsson scored. What a brilliant game. That was just like, oh my word, this is amazing.
That was huge. I bet everyone on Facebook and Twitter at the time just going off. Everyone that we knew, obviously, from school and stuff, it was incredible.
People certainly pretend they were Cardiff fans. Anyway. Anyway. Also, I snuck in another Cardiff one. My favourite is, he said league match, but I'm just going to sneak in the Carling Cup final. Cardiff losing to Liverpool on penalties.
Yeah, I enjoyed that as well.
I'm sure you did. It was devastating for me, but 1-1 in normal time. Again, Cardiff Championship side against Liverpool, not fancied at all, but 1-1 in normal time.
Well, Liverpool weren't fancied at all.
Well,
we're going to stew it down this time.
2-2 after extra time. Ben Turner scored a late goal to equalise it in front of the Cardiff fans, going mental, absolutely crazy.
Were you there?
Yeah, I was there. Yeah, actually just behind the goal where he scored. And then we lost on pens. Anthony Gerrard.
That's one of the worst penalty shootouts ever.
Yeah.
They were some dreadful penalties.
There was, I think.
Charlie Adams' ball still rising, I think.
Yeah, terrible. But yeah, Kenny Dalglish obviously winning a cup again with Liverpool. He was a manager back then. And also then my TV one is, I think, probably a lot of people's favourite game for a club not involved with Cardiff. Manchester City's title win against QPR on the last day of the season. Again, we were in university for that. I was watching it around some friend's house. All of them were Man United fans apart from me and an Everton fan, cheering on Man City. And I just, the Aguero moment, that commentary when it hit the back of the net and just hugging him in the middle of the room, dancing around with the devastated Man United fans around me was, honestly, I will never forget it. What a moment that was.
I can remember celebrating that. I mean, I wouldn't celebrate now for Man City, but back then, I think just because Man United lost it more, was quite a nice thing to happen.
Oh, it was sensational. Just what a moment. I will never forget. I still sort of get goosebumps if I ever watch that video on YouTube or anything. What a moment that was.
Amazing.
Brilliant. Great question, Stephen. Okay. Another question from sort of a big fan of ours again. He's written for us in the past, Tim Hartley. He says, effectively, I'll shorten it, do you think the European Super League has been rumoured, leaks about it, different things like that, do you think it'll save football? Now, he asked it from a context of not a big club fan. He doesn't support the big clubs.
He's a big fan of Welsh football as well.
Yeah, big fan of Welsh football. And he says, do you think it's going to save football? And we had a bit of a conversation off air about this. And I see where he's coming from. I think if we let Juventus and PSG and Barcelona and whoever goes from the Premier League, should it happen, Man City, Man United, whoever, if it happens, and people will say it will rip the Premier League apart, I think it would be a real shame. I think it would be a terrible shame if it happens.
Yeah.
But I understand where he's coming from. If we let the money go and they play each week in Doha and then Vietnam and then Dubai and in Brazil, wherever they're going to play these games, and everyone who wants to watch it can watch it and they can pay their subscription to whatever TV channel gets it, and there'll be billions of pounds of prize money and their places will be guaranteed, yes, it'll be really devastating for the domestic leagues. Is it the end of the world? I don't think it is at all. And he says, will it save football? Because will it give football back to those who weren't?
Yeah. Well, I was quite confused at first time, but I messaged you on Facebook saying, do you know what it means? Because I've always thought of it in a negative light.
Yeah.
I would have thought the question would be, will a European Super League ruin football? But then by Save Football made us actually think, and after you explained it all to me and you gave me this a massive essay, didn't you?
Sorry, I did. A big spiel.
That it really made it clear to me, and I quite agree actually.
Yeah, I think it's football's different for different people, and as I said when I was talking to you, there's lots of people who enjoy football from a purely watching from afar, watching on TV. I saw someone saying they're a better Arsenal fan than all the people who live in London because they wake up at 4 a.m. to watch the games in Canada. I disagree. Go and watch. You can enjoy Arsenal, of course you can, but go and watch some local football. For me, who loves football in a stadium, who one day will take his kids to watch Cardiff City play, who absolutely adores everything about the atmosphere of going to a live football match, that's more important than watching things on TV. So yes, of course I'll watch it. I love football. I'd like to see those big clubs compete. I think it would be really bad for the Premier League, but I think we'll exist. We'll be fine without it. Say those top six go, and I don't think the top six would go, but say top six go, we'll have a brilliant race, except it'll be Wolves who are top of the league instead of...
Yeah, I think now hearing it again is a good idea in order it wouldn't maybe save these lower clubs and make football pure again.
Yes.
But thinking about what we talked about earlier about the history of transfers, money's always in the game. And I think even if these bigger clubs leave, the money will still be there, and there'll still be the best teams which have bigger budgets compared to the lower teams, and it might just be Wolves being the dominant team.
Exactly. We talked about that, and me and Lewis earlier talked about that, and we were saying actually, there is a good chance that would happen. Actually, you would just get another big domination of a club. I saw someone who went forward 100 years in time on Football Manager, simulated 100 years to look at who sort of won the league and who dominated, and throughout that 100-year period, different clubs rose and fall, and I've talked about my Football Manager love. On that, Liverpool have been relegated by 2036. They've come back up. Everton have been relegated. Sunderland have fallen down to the conference. Birmingham have fallen down to the conference and come back up. It happens in football. There's swings and roundabouts, and of course Juventus dominate. Of course Man City dominate. Of course PSG dominate. What I think people don't want is that to be that 20 years time.
I think it's more financial fair play needs to be a bit stricter.
Yeah.
Simply. I think there probably should be budgets on transfers and how much you can spend, because I think it is out of control at the moment. But I did do a bit of research on it myself.
Yeah.
The European Super League. So I found that in February 2019, I read an article and UEFA put to bed talks of the breakaway European Super League by announcing new legislation that it would protect domestic top tiers until 2024. But that for me doesn't put it to bed. It just means 2024
no, because
it reopens again.
Clubs like Juventus have already said they want reform to the Champions League. They're pushing for it. And I think Matthew Said, who does the podcast with Freddie Flintoff and Robbie Savage, brilliant podcast, he said that actually there's this real fear that these clubs are sort of getting smaller gains, marginal gains. By saying there's a breakaway, we're going to break away, clubs panic because they think we don't want the big clubs to go, and so they get their way because they can lean on UEFA, lean on the domestic league a little bit more. So yeah, I think that doesn't put it to bed, no.
The most recent article, though, the German Football League president has said that the Premier League and the Bundesliga will block the plans developed by the European Club Association for a Super League. So there we go. But I did go even further, so I wanted to find out who these teams would be if there was a European Super League. So Der Spiegel, a German magazine, found alleged emails from Real Madrid, a consultant on a work of a 16-team Super League. Do you want to know what the teams would have been?
Go on.
Do you want to know? Okay, so there's 11 clubs who would always be in there for at least 5 seasons. Yeah, they would have been Man United, Chelsea, Liverpool, Man City, Arsenal, Real Madrid, Barcelona, Bayern Munich, Juventus, AC Milan and PSG. And 5 teams that would change every year, but the first 5 teams would have been Atletico Madrid, Borussia Dortmund, Inter Milan, Roma, and Marseille. So the big winners out of that would have been Spurs, because they would have probably winning the league quite comfortably. So
there we go. That's
I think it's something that you see. I don't think it would happen. I just don't think it will happen. But it's something that
we'll see in a few years' time, eh?
Yeah.
Maybe we'll be talking about it. But
I think the Champions League might change.
Ultimately, I just think, as a final point on that, I think the reason that we love these big teams competing, and this is what people are saying, we want to see them compete every week. No, I don't think we do. I want to see them compete twice a year, over a 2-leg tie in the Champions League. I don't want to see Liverpool, Barcelona really, really regularly. I want to see it every few years. I want to see Juventus, PSG every now and then. I don't want it every single week of these big teams playing each other.
It would ruin it. And you know what would happen is a team in the European Super League would have more money than someone else. The team that wins it, maybe for 2 years in a row, would get all the best players, and again the vicious cycle would return, and there'd be a team dominating that league as well.
Yeah, great question, Tim. Thank you for that. We'll talk about that perhaps if it comes around again. Just a very quick one from Petra Saxby. She talked about why didn't you discuss how the FA shut down women's football and how it fought back from that. Great question, and we will talk about it in a future podcast. I think we need to dedicate more time to it, don't we? Really,
we've written quite extensively about women's football around that time, the 1920s and the ban, haven't we?
Yeah.
On the blog. But I think we probably have to dedicate a whole podcast to women's football and maybe get some guests on as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be great. And a final one, just a point a few people mentioned to us about give credit to hhtkhy Nomads for their win over Kilmarnock. Absolutely. This is quite famous. Obviously, hhtkhy Nomads, the Welsh football club who were in the qualifying for the Europa League. They beat Scottish team Kilmarnock. There's some very funny videos around of some Scottish people that are sort of really upset because they've already booked their flights for the next round. What results? They lost 2-1 at home. And then went up to Kilmarnock with their manager Andy Morrison saying lots of them had to be back in work the next day. Obviously driving back, some of them, so they wouldn't get back until sort of 5-6 in the morning, then go to work. But they won 2-0, kept a clean sheet away and dumped Kilmarnock out. So they've got a chance of qualifying.
Said romance is dead?
Yeah, absolutely. And also TNS, all the best to TNS, because they have sort of double shot. They've got their Champions League qualifying. If they lose that, then they drop into the Europa League qualifying. So hopefully, so it'd be lovely to see one of them sides for the Welsh Premier League make it into a group stage of a European competition.
Great for the Welsh game,
cheering them on game all the way. Okay, before we round off with our final Premier League predictions for the season ahead, let's just have a go at Guess the Year. You like the quiz Guess the Year? It's gone down well. You've done very well at it. Last time you got it in 2 questions.
I smashed it last time.
You did smash it last time. First time you didn't do so well. Let's see how you do this time. There's quite a few sport questions in this. I've put in more sports, so let's see your general sport knowledge. Okay, first one. And if you know it, have a guess every time, but don't give it away for the listeners. Okay, the first ever Ryder Cup takes place in June of this year. The USA beat Great Britain 9.5 to 2.5. Walter Hagen is the American captain. Ted Ray is the GB captain. Who do you think?
That's a bit of a stuffing, isn't it?
That is a bit of a stuffing.
I'll go for 1912.
1912, okay. Why else happened in 1912?
The Titanic sank.
Good with them. I will never use that if I'm doing 1912.
I'm going on a cruise next week. That's a bit scary.
Yeah. Number 2. Saudi Arabia earns its independence from Great Britain.
Oh. That's a bit... Ooh. 90. I think it's quite old, right? I'll go for 1910.
Okay. Number 3. This may give you a bit more of a clue. Commercial transatlantic telephone service is inaugurated between New York and London.
So
transatlantic telephone lines.
Between
New York and
London. 08.
1908.
We go back in 2s.
Okay, that's fine. I'm glad it's a thinker.
Flipping heck, this is hard. Okay, go on.
Number 4, another sport one.
Give me some line.
The Harlem Globetrotters play their first game in Illinois.
1914.
Okay. Here we go. Start narrowing it down for you. Question 5. Henry Ford and the Ford Motor Company produced their last and also the 15th million. So they stop on 15 million. Model T Fords. That famous car that Tim Lizzie.
I'm well off. 1930.
Okay.
I reckon I know what that's.
This may bring it in. 15th of January. The first live sport is broadcast on BBC Radio. It's a Rugby Union International between England and Wales, and then a week later, a Football Manager broadcast.
1926.
This is a
because
fact that people
BBC
may know.
is around that time when it was set up, and radio. I'm pretty sure the FA Cup final would have been on the radio.
Okay. May 20th at 7:14 a.m. Charles Lindbergh takes off from New York to cross the Atlantic non-stop, the first non-stop flight from New York to Paris.
I'll stick with 26.
And very finally, Cardiff City become the first non-English side to win the FA Cup.
1927.
1927, they beat Arsenal 1-0 at Wembley. 1927. Didn't do as well this time. Good, I'm glad they confused you a bit. It was too easy.
It was his first four, really. Yeah. I mean, I knew, Ryder Cup, I thought it would be older than that.
Yeah, I was surprised.
Older.
I was surprised. Okay.
That's a pretty old game.
It is.
It's older than football, isn't it?
However, I guess organising a thing between America and Great Britain perhaps slightly more difficult.
Yeah, maybe. Good stuff.
Okay, the final thing we wanted to do, just because this is the last podcast before the Premier League season starts, we're both on holiday these next couple of weeks, we're going to do some predictions, and then we're going to put them away in an envelope, and we're going to open them at the end of the season and see how close we were, how spot on we were with these. So what I want you to do is predict the top 6, the bottom 3, the Golden Boot, the Player of the Year, and also who's going to win the Champions League. Okay, so go with your top 6.
Should we go? I'll say my first.
1-1. Yeah. Okay. Fine.
Man City.
Man City. I think I've got a little note on each of them. I think Pep is he loves to dominate domestically, and I think he's going to do something again.
Yeah. 2.
Liverpool.
Close,
but no title again.
Yeah, I think that can agree more. 3.
This is interesting. I was really torn on 3.
Okay.
I've gone with Chelsea.
I can't with Chelsea.
Have you as well? I wasn't sure, but I think Lampard, obviously with the transfer ban, I think he's going to try and get the best out of the youth, and maybe we'll see some breakthrough players.
I think it's more, for me it's more because of the other teams behind him.
That too as well. 4th?
Spurs.
Is
that what you got as well?
Yeah. Kane enjoying VAR is what I've got as in brackets. I think Tottenham, for me, they're 4th best out of those 6.
The signing of Ndombele is going to be a good...
Yeah, I can't wait to see him.
Good signing. Next, the 5th?
Manchester United.
I got Arsenal.
Oh, okay, there's where we disagree. I think the good signings will eventually gel by the end of the season. A few good signings. Hopefully Daniel James for Welsh football. There's a few potential there. Wan-Bissaka had a very good season last year. I think they've strengthened more than Arsenal.
They have strengthened. I don't think Wan-Bissaka at right back is going to make much difference, personally. And I think Danny Ceballos is going to be a good loan acquisition.
So you think Arsenal 5th? I've said Arsenal 6th, and I assume who you got 6th?
I think Unai Emery's good at Man United.
Man United.
Because of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer.
Not Wolves, not tempted by Wolves?
I was tempted by Wolves.
They linked to some brilliant players. Patrick Cutrone from AC Milan.
That'd be incredible.
So they may well break.
I think with Ole at the wheel, it's United. No, not for me, unless he goes.
Yeah, I think ask Cardiff fans and they'll say similar about Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Okay, your bottom 3.
Okay,
18th.
18th, Burnley.
I've gone Crystal Palace. If Zaha goes. So if Zaha goes, I think Crystal Palace are really going to struggle.
Yeah, and if Zaha joins Arsenal, and that I think confirms them as my 5th.
Okay, it's fine. Yeah, I didn't consider that as for Arsenal, but yeah, if Palace lose him, obviously they've lost Wan-Bissaka as well, and he's not a goal scorer, but a very good player. I think Palace may well struggle. They've not really signed many players.
I think Burnley have had their time.
Okay. 19th.
Sheffield United.
I've gone Newcastle. Interesting.
Now, I was played 5-side last night, and I told some of my mates, Reese, who's tweeted us a lot of times, he wrote for us, and my mate John, I said Sheffield United, and they said, you haven't got Newcastle in there, because they're obviously going to go down with Steve Bruce, but I think they made a signing today, haven't they? A big signing from Hoffenheim, I think.
I've put in brackets, Bruce sacked, Pardew takes him down. Bruce sacked by Christmas, Alan Pardew takes him down. 19th. I hope not for them. It's been a torrid time for a Newcastle fan, but replacing Rafa with Bruce, selling all your best players.
I don't want to see Alan Pardew dancing anymore.
No.
It's
and bottom of the Premier League,
Brighton.
Oh, interesting. I've gone Sheffield United, and I hope not again because I really like Sheffield United. I think they're another Cardiff for me, but I just think at the moment it looks too tough for them to survive. People say that at Cardiff and
Brighton have had their time.
Yeah.
They ran it close last season. They almost lost it to Cardiff, didn't they? So, yeah,
absolutely. Okay,
it's all right, Brighton.
Your Golden Boot,
lovely place though. Golden Boot, Harry Kane.
Harry Kane for me too.
VAR.
Absolutely.
Although I was tempted by Salah again. He won it 2 years in a row, and
I think he's going to be hurt because he's going to get caught out a little bit more though, potentially.
Okay.
For the old tumbling.
Okay.
In the box.
That's the whole episode. We could debate that. Okay.
Yeah.
Player of the season.
I was torn. I think I've gone just because he had such a good season last year. Bernardo Silva. I've gone Sterling runs in close, but I think Bernardo Silva had a brilliant... He wasn't a young player, did he? Or he was certainly close to it.
Sterling was a young player.
He was very close. Bernardo was brilliant last year, and I think he's going to fill that David Silva role now. I think Bernardo could have a very good season. It's a bit of a punt, but I think he's brilliant.
Has he got one more season, does he?
Yeah, but he's going to start fading now, isn't he? Or Sterling running close.
Season?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go on for a bit of Firmino.
That's even more random than Bernardo's, though.
I think, well, last season, Mane, I think was Liverpool's asset for Van Dijk. Season before we had Salah. I think this year, after watching him at the Copa America, I think Firmino, if he stays fit all season, will be the best player in the league.
Very good punt.
He's very underrated as well.
I heard Paul Ince say this. Would you take Gareth Bale on loan if it was available?
Yeah, but then he'd just be a squad player.
Yeah.
And would he want to join? Probably not.
Probably not. Okay, and very finally, who do you think is going to win the Champions League this year?
Well, I had 3 teams. I'm now down to 3 teams, but I have got my one.
Okay,
so
what's your 3?
Liverpool, Juventus and Barcelona. Juventus for their squad, but then I feel like they bottle it every year. Barcelona for Griezmann, I think is an incredible signing. I rate him very highly as a player, but I feel like the demons of the last 2 seasons could come back to haunt them. So I'm going to say Liverpool again.
Retain 3 finals in a row and retain the Champions League.
I think over 2 legs and the Anfield factor is huge.
And Klopp's lost that final losing hoodoo as well.
Exactly.
I have gone for one of them. I've gone Juventus. And I just put it comes together. I think Rambo and Buffon, I'd love to see them both get one. Buffon because he's re-signed. I think Ronaldo may lead them to another. I don't know if I would necessarily want that, but I think I'd love to see Ramsey win a Champions League. That'd be brilliant.
I think people will say Juventus because they got a good squad, but I think they got to gel, all these new players.
Yeah, of course.
And they don't gel.
And, just referring back to the Super League, I think that's why Juventus are in favourite, because actually they're going to walk there.
Exactly. There's no competition in their league, is there? So,
and the same with PSG, isn't it? PSG basically won the league by March, and therefore they weren't up to it when it comes to competitive football.
Same with Barcelona last season as well.
Yeah.
They've been done it. I think you're Liverpool, yeah.
Okay, good. Very good. I've enjoyed that. I've enjoyed this pod. As we said, it's a little bit longer today, but that's because we are off. You're off on a cruise.
Yep.
I'm off to Greece for next week as well. So we will be back afterwards to debate some new topics. As ever, get involved at TFHBS on Twitter.
Or on our email, thefootballhistoryboys@hotmail.com.
On Facebook, give us a search, The Football History Boys. And as ever, just let us know what your thoughts are. Give us your Premier League predictions, and we'll pull them out at the end of the season too.
Yeah, we'll see if you're right. And if you're right, we'll give you a prize.
Not of monetary value.
We'll give you some stamps.
Legal tender.
There you go.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for listening, and have a nice start to your summer. We'll see you next time.
Goodbye.